Welcome to Bizarre Podcast.
If I was to ask you when did Nelson Mandela die, what would your answer be? Do you remember him dying in the 1980s? Well, if this sounds correct to you, I'm afraid I have to tell you that you're mistaken. But don't worry, you're not the only one. Nelson Mandela, the first president of South Africa, died at the grand age of 95 at his home in Houghton, Johannesburg, South Africa, on the 5th of December 2013. But many have a vivid memory of Nelson Mandela passing away in prison in the 1980s, and even remember his funeral being broadcast on the television. And this strange case of wrongful memories that seemed to affect quite a lot of people was given the name the Mandela effect. And believe it or not, there are many more of these, let's call them false memories, out there that may even take you by surprise. Obscure things that have happened in history that a large majority vividly remember happening differently. And that's what makes the Mandela effect so interesting. It's not just one or two people having different memories of something. It seems to be a large number of the population who have vivid memories of certain events happening very differently. And here is where it gets nuts. The theories as to why this happens ranges from simple tricks of the mind, creating false memories, to the fantastical idea that maybe we are sharing two separate realities of timelines with an alternate universe. And some memories are kind of bleeding through each one. But where did this seemingly far-fetched theory come from? Well, according to Wikipedia, in 2010 this shared false memory phenomenon was dubbed the Mandela effect by self-described paranormal consultant Fiona Broom. In reference to a false memory she reported of the death of South African leader Nelson Mandela in the 1980s, who actually lived until December 2013, which we just said, which she claimed was shared by perhaps thousands of other people. And from that day on, when word got out on the internet about the Mandela effect, it kind of exploded, and all of a sudden there was loads of people all over the internet who had different memories of things happening differently in their childhood or in the past. And now there are literally hundreds of these examples of false memories that have been reported. And for this episode I've actually picked out a lot of the ones that I consider to be the best examples of the Mandela effect, and we'll be covering that a little bit later on. But first I want to just tell you some of the wild theories as to why the Mandela effect is actually happening. So the theories as to why this is happening ranges from simple tricks of the mind, creating false memories, to the fantastical idea that maybe we are sharing two separate realities or two separate timelines with an alternate universe. And some memories are kind of seeping through time and space, and they've kind of stuck with some of us of a history that seemingly never happened. And here's just one of the first theories about how this all came about. Now, you may have heard of the Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest particle collider in the world, which is located beneath the border of Switzerland and France. It's a giant underground tunnel that is a massive 17 miles long. Now, according to the Hadron Collider CERN website, the Hadron Collider consists of a 27-kilometre ring of superconducting magnets with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy of the particles along the way. Inside the accelerator, two high-energy particle beams travel at close to the speed of light before they are made to collide. Now, this large science experiment was created to find unique particles in an attempt to understand time and space better. To find the God particle, which it did. It found the Higgs boson particle, as well as other particles. I remember before this machine was switched on, there was an uproar in the science and public communities. There was a lot of worry about this collider bringing about the end of the world, and although that might sound a little bit too far-fetched, apparently the collider does have the capability to create black holes. And this actually scared a lot of people, and many people believe that if this machine was switched on, that it was quite possible it could create a big enough black hole to destroy everything we know. Now, there is a theory that the collider is capable of creating quantum black holes, but these would be very minuscule and would devour themselves as soon as they were created. And although many don't buy into this, and I think it's probably just scaremongering, the Hadron Collider has been switched on, and we have not been devoured by any black holes as of yet. But let's just forget about the black holes. Let's just ask, is it possible that this machine that was created to give insight into time and space may have altered reality and time when it was initially powered on? Well, some believe the answer is yes. Some believe that when the collider was switched on and the two particle beams were sent flying around the 17-mile structure close to the speed of light and then collided, they believe that this was the day that the very fabric of time and space was altered and created these different timelines with small differences in history. And for some reason, we, or at least some of us, can remember history unfolding differently or happening differently in the past. And the main theory behind this is that when the Hadron Collider was switched on, it somehow attracted alternate universes to merge with our own, where such events in these alternate universes may happen slightly different to how they happen on our universe. There could be a universe out there where everything is identical, more or less, with little differences. For instance, let's try and do an example. Let's say that our universe is called Universe 1. And this morning, you got up, you got ready for work, you set out, you got in your car, you drove to work, and you was there on time. But in Universe 2, you did everything exactly the same. You got up, you got in your car, you set off to work, but there was a traffic jam, and you didn't get there in time. That is an example of the different universes where just subtle things are slightly different, but more or less everything is running the same. Here's another example. Universe 1. You get invited to a party. You don't really feel like going, but you think, I'll go anyway. When you're at the party, you meet the love of your life. You fall in love, you have babies, you get married, etc, etc. Universe 2. You're invited to a party. You don't really want to go, so you decide not to. And you never meet the love of your life. And your life goes on an entirely different path. I mean, it's a bit of a depressing example, I'll admit, but that's the kind of thing you want to think of when you're thinking of alternate parallel universes, where things are happening more or less the same, but there are small differences, sometimes big differences. Now let's do this example one more time, but this time with how we opened the episode with the Nelson Mandela false memory. Okay, so once again we've got Universe 1, our universe, our timeline now at the moment. Nelson Mandela is placed in prison. Then eventually in 1990, he's released from prison and he goes on to be the president of South Africa. And then eventually we get up to 2013 and Nelson Mandela passes away. But then you have Universe 2, the alternate universe. Nelson Mandela is put into prison. Nelson Mandela dies in prison in 1985. The television's broadcast his funeral, and this is a very big thing, very big news story. Everyone remembers it. So there you have history taking two very different paths on each universe. On our universe, Nelson Mandela lives till 2013. In the theoretical multiverse universe, he dies in 1985. And then back on our universe, and possibly in the alternate universe, on September the 10th, 2008, the Hadron Collider is switched on, and eventually the first experiment takes place, and both universes, both realities, are somehow merged together. That's the far-fetched theory that we're going to be discussing today. So that's one theory as to why the Mandela effect takes place, and believe me, there are many more. They just get crazier from here on in. Another wild theory is that somewhere in the future, time travel has been invented, and all these alternative memories that we are having are the result of a possible time traveller who has changed something in the past that has caused the ripple in time, with small alterations to history, and once again, for some reason, we can recall both realities. Now, interestingly enough, these two theories, the Hadron Collider theory and the time traveller theory, are somehow connected. Now, there is a story that has been going around the internet for quite some time now about a time traveller that you may find convincing, you may not, but nevertheless it is very interesting, and I hope to do an episode on it sometime in the future. The time traveller I'm talking about is called John Titor. He's a guy who appeared on numerous online forums talking about time travel. He claimed that he was an American military time traveller from 2036. He also claimed that time travel was invented in the year 2034 by CERN. Now, CERN are the people who created the Hadron Collider in Theory 1. Now, John Titor has posted many different explanations for time travel, and also mentions that on occasion he has altered reality and history, and some of the things he allegedly changed were things such as car models that no longer seem to exist in the timeline he was in at the present, books that were published later than originally came out, and even bigger changes such as skyscrapers which were there in one timeline, but in the new timeline never existed and were never built. So as you can imagine, it wasn't long before someone put these internet stories of a supposed time traveller together with the Mandela effect and made up their own theory. So a lot of John Titor believers have come up with the idea that John Titor is responsible for the Mandela effect that we sometimes experience, if you believe in this theory. But there is a more down-to-earth explanation that I will explain to you at the end of this episode. But before we get there, let's discuss some of these false memories, and some of them are actually quite convincing. So, as we've said a few times now, this all started with Nelson Mandela, the false memory around his death. And it wasn't long before more possible Mandela effect theories were brought to light. So I've scoured the internet and I've accumulated a list of what I think are the best examples of the Mandela effect. There are hundreds out there, and some of them are quite ridiculous. But these ones I've picked here I think are some of the best examples. The first is possibly one of the best known examples of the Mandela effect. So let's get to it. Okay, Mandela effect number 1. In the 1990s, actor and comedian Sinbad played a magical genie in a movie called Shazam. Do you remember this movie? Well, if you do, I'm sorry, but it never existed. This film was never made, but so many people remember watching this movie in their childhood days. And they remember the film so well, and they also seem to remember the box art as well, the VHS box cover. Now, I don't actually have this memory of a Sinbad movie ever existing, but like I said, so many people do. Now, it is possible that they are confusing this movie with another, starring Shaq O'Neal as a genie called Kazam. And I actually remember this film. I actually remember renting it on VHS when I was a child. So I can confirm that I remember this memory this way, but so many people remember it the other way, with Sinbad starring in this movie, and the movie not being called Kazam, but Shazam. What do you remember? Mandela effect number 2. In the Disney movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the evil queen never once said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" She actually says, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all." Now this one had people in disbelief and amazement, including me. I've always thought it was pronounced "mirror, mirror on the wall" in the film. And even Disney have used the quote "mirror, mirror on the wall" on many of the Snow White merchandise throughout the years. So if even Disney don't know what they quoted in their own movie, well, I think that just makes that even more compelling. But no, she never once said "mirror, mirror on the wall." She actually said "magic mirror on the wall." I think, wow, that's a good one, that one. Okay, Mandela effect number 3. This one got me. The Monopoly Man. Now, we all know the Monopoly Man. Rich Uncle Pennybags, as you may know him. No doubt you can picture him vividly as I describe him to you now. He's a little man with a tash, a nice black suit. He's wearing a top hat and a monocle. Right? You remember him? You've got that vision in your head? Well, he's not quite as I described him. And this shocked me. The Monopoly Man never wore a monocle. Not at all. But this one makes me laugh because it is so frustrating, because I am positive that I remember him wearing a monocle. I mean, I played this game non-stop in my childhood. It was one of my favourite games. I loved it, and just the fact that he never actually wore the monocle just shocks me, because it's just one of the memories that have stuck in my mind, which is obviously a fake memory that I've created for myself, or it's an alternate reality. But it's just frustrating, that one, because I remember it so well that he had a monocle, but obviously I was wrong. Anyway, Mandela effect number 4. Do you remember the great